Welcome to Short Movie Channel. The movie begins with a 12-year-old boy named Henry, who's waiting for the school bus with his younger brother, Peter. As soon as they get on the bus, all the kids start bullying Peter because of his weak eyesight. They even knock him to the ground. When they arrive at school, Henry has English class. The teacher asks each student to come up and talk about their goals in life. When it's Henry's turn, he tells his classmates that his dreams might be simple, but what he truly wants is to be able to take responsibility and take care of his mom, Susan, and his little brother, Peter, because they mean everything to him, and he couldn't live without them. After school, Peter waits outside for their mom, Susan, to pick them up, while Henry calls the CEO of a cosmetics company and buys some shares in the company for his mom, planning to invest her money in the stock market. The CEO is amazed by Henry's intelligence, especially since he's just 12 years old and already tracking the stock market so closely. Later, Susan comes to take the boys home. Henry keeps the stock investment a secret from her because she usually wastes the profits every year by gambling. When they get home, Henry heads to a small shed in the woods where he works on all his inventions. He shows Peter his latest creation, a small device that spreads cream on a pie. Despite being just a kid, Henry sees himself as the one responsible for the family. He even handles all the bills and monthly household expenses. Meanwhile, their mom Susan is playing video games. After she's done, she shares a story she wrote for Henry and Peter. Henry is impressed by it and encourages her to quit her job at the donut shop and focus on writing. But she brushes it off and tells him she's going to her room because she has work in the morning. Before she leaves, she notices a medal on Henry's desk and realizes he won it in a school invention competition. The next day, Susan makes breakfast for the boys before taking them to school. Their neighbor, Glenn, complains that the leaves from her yard are blowing into his. She promises to clean it up after work. She then greets Christina, his stepdaughter, whose mom passed away. Christina is in the same class as Henry. Susan tells Henry that Christina is a sweet girl but has had a tough life since her mom died, and no one is really looking out for her. Then Susan goes to work at the donut shop, where the owner asks if she wants her paycheck in cash or deposited into the bank. She says she'll ask her son Henry first because he handles all the finances at home. The owner is surprised, given that Henry is only 12. At school, Henry is hanging out when Peter comes running to him, upset because some kids beat him up and stole his medal. Henry goes with him to get it back. On the way, he sees Christina sitting alone, clearly upset. He ignores Peter for a moment and goes to check on Christina, asking if she's okay. Suddenly, he hears Peter scream. He finds him getting beaten up and his medal broken. Henry rushes in and threatens the bullies, warning them not to touch his brother again. That night at home, Peter is upset with Henry for leaving him to go talk to Christina. Henry tries to cheer him up by putting on his helmet and pretending he's climbing a mountain in a snowstorm, just to make him laugh. Later, their mom Susan comes home with her friend Sheila, and they hang out all night. Susan says she's been through a lot since her husband died, but she's lucky to have Henry, such a mature boy who's always looking after her and Peter. That night, Henry is in his room when he suddenly wakes up with a loud ringing in his head. He takes a painkiller and stands by the window for some fresh air. By chance, he sees Christina sitting alone in her room. Then suddenly, her stepfather enters, and Henry witnesses him sexually assaulting her. The next day, Henry wakes up feeling upset and confused by what he saw. He tells Susan that they need to leave right away because he has an exam at school. So Susan takes them to the car, and while they're getting in, she sees Christina sitting alone in front of her house. She waves at her. When they arrive, Henry notices that Christina is quiet and seems upset. It turns out Green, her mom's husband, is abusing her. Henry gets really angry and goes to the school principal to report what happened to Christina. He asks her to call the police and have Green investigated and arrested. But the principal tells him, unfortunately, that Green is a deputy in the police and has influence in the town. She says there's nothing she can do without solid evidence. After school ends, Susan picks up Henry and his little brother Peter. They head to the supermarket to buy some groceries. There, Henry sees a man hitting his daughter and tries to go help her, but Susan stops him and tells him not to interfere in things that aren't his business to avoid trouble. But once they get home, Henry secretly calls Child Protective Services. He tells them that their neighbor Green is abusing Christina every day and asks them to arrest him as soon as possible and check in on Christina, because she seems completely broken by what's happening. Later, he helps Susan unload the groceries from the car. Christina shows up and gives him a medal she won in a ballet competition. She asks him to give her his badge in exchange for the medal, since his classmates had broken it earlier. Susan then comes over, greets Christina, and tells Green that there's a school talent show in a month and she'll take Christina to participate. Later that evening, Henry watches Christina's house and sees a CPS worker talking to Green, telling him someone reported him for constantly abusing Christina. Henry notices that the worker doesn't really do anything. He looks up the names of the CPS officials and is shocked by what he finds. So, Henry decides he'll save Christina himself, without anyone's help. He starts reading books about solving murders, then visits a gun shop and writes down gun prices in his notebook. It's clear he's planning to kill Green. Suddenly, he gets a terrible headache and has to return home to take painkillers. That night, Susan wakes up to Peter screaming. When she runs to him, she finds Henry on the floor shaking with a seizure. She rushes him to the hospital. When Henry regains consciousness, Dr. David, a neurologist, asks if he's been having frequent headaches. Henry tells him the headaches have been going on for 4 months. Dr. David examines Henry's scans and diagnoses him with a brain tumor. He says Henry needs surgery immediately. Susan is asked to sign the consent form so they can operate right away. Suddenly, Henry starts having another seizure, and they rush him to the OR to remove the tumor. After surgery, Henry wakes up and talks to Dr. David. The doctor tells him that he tried to remove the tumor, but unfortunately it had spread all over his brain. He has less than a month to live. Susan breaks down when she hears this, and Henry asks her to leave the room so he can think about what to do with the time he has left. Unexpectedly, Henry remains calm and accepts the idea of dying. After thinking it over, he decides to use the rest of his life to help others as much as he can. He starts writing notes in his notebook for Susan to read after he's gone. As time passes, the whole family begins to fall into depression because of his condition. Peter, his younger brother, tries to spend as much time as possible with Henry, playing with him and cheering him up. Henry asks him to go get some ice cream from the store. While Peter is gone, Henry talks to his mom and asks her to bring him all the household bills so he can review them, like he used to. Susan gets emotional, realizing how responsible he still is even while he's sick, and she leaves the room so he doesn't see her cry. She's still trying to process the idea that he's going to die and leave her. When Peter returns, he talks to Henry and tells him he's worried about their mom. Henry asks him to give Susan the notebook after he dies. Peter starts crying and tells Henry he doesn't want him to die because he loves him and can't imagine life without him. The next day, Susan comes back with the bills, like Henry asked. He tries to teach her how to manage monthly expenses and invest in the stock market. She gets emotional again and tells him she doesn't want to learn anything, she just wants to stay by his side. Eventually she calms down, hugs him, and tells him that he's always taken care of her, and she doesn't know how she'll go on without him. Time passes after that. One day, Henry wakes up with a headache and walks over to the window because he wants to open it and look at the sky. Susan tries to help him, but sadly he dies. Some time passes, and Peter is seen sitting alone at school. Christina comes to take him home. Susan is also depressed and can't get over Henry's death. The next day, Peter comes home from school and finds Susan cooking in the kitchen. She pretends to be okay, acting like she's moved on from Henry's death. But Peter tells her that pretending won't change what happened. The only way to move on is to cry and let all the sadness out. Then the doorbell rings. Susan answers it, and is surprised to see Dr. David, who came by to check on them. When the doctor enters the house, he speaks to Peter, and says he knows he's grieving his brother. He gives Peter his business card and tells him to call if he needs anything. Then he leaves. A week later, Susan goes back to work, trying to move past her grief. Her boss tells her that before Henry died, he sent a letter requesting that she be let go from her job so she could rest and focus on writing stories. Her boss also tells her that Henry managed to invest her money in the stock market and turned it into $700,000, which he deposited into her bank account. Meanwhile, Peter returns home and finds Henry's notebook. He remembers Henry told him to give it to Susan after his death. Peter tears up as he reads it, then runs to his mom to give it to her. He tells her that Henry wanted to kill Glenn because he was abusing Christina. Henry had told Peter to give Susan the notebook so she could read it and do what it says. Susan reads the notebook and finds out Henry wrote that Glenn was continuously abusing Christina, and despite trying to help her in every way, nothing worked. Glenn had power and influence through the police, so no one could investigate him. That's why Henry created a precise plan to kill him. Peter tells his mom they must fulfill Henry's wish and kill Glenn, because Henry never made a decision without a good reason. But Susan refuses and calls the police officer to tell him everything. However, when she arrives at the police station, she sees the officer casually talking with Glenn. She realizes they won't be able to arrest him, just like Henry had written. Back at home, Susan opens the notebook again and finds a page where Henry wrote that he had hidden something important in his safe. She opens the safe and finds a recorded tape. In it, Henry explains that he planned to kill Glenn because there was no other solution. He asks her to follow through with the plan to help Christina, saying they can't abandon her, she's an orphan and has no one but them. One day, Susan leaves the house while listening to Henry's recording. He instructs her to withdraw $10,000 from the nearest ATM, then visit the gun shop he used to go to and check prices. He tells her to buy a sniper rifle. Susan follows all the instructions exactly, even training to use the sniper so she can kill Glenn. She's amazed at how smart Henry was to plan everything so precisely. Later, she sees Glenn tending his garden and approaches him, saying she needs his advice on something important. He invites her into his home to talk. She tells him she's looking for a trustworthy person to become Peter's guardian in case anything happens to her. Glenn suggests an orphanage or a family that can have children. Susan changes the subject and tells him she'll be taking Christina to the school talent show tomorrow. She lets him know Christina is participating and needs his signature on a permission slip to perform. Glenn is convinced and signs the paper. Back home, Susan practices copying his signature, and it turns out all of this was part of Henry's plan. She was going to forge his signature on the legal guardianship papers, making herself Christina's guardian after Glenn is gone. Peter asks her why she's still awake, since she usually sleeps early. Susan doesn't tell him what she's doing. She just takes the cat to help him fall asleep. Peter then reveals that he joined the school's talent show and will be doing a magic trick. The next day, Susan follows the rest of Henry's plan. She gets ready for the talent show and takes Peter and Christina with her. When they arrive, she runs into Dr. David, who had treated Henry. He tells her that Peter invited him to watch him perform. As the show starts, Susan sets her watch to match Peter's performance time, then rushes home. At home, she grabs the sniper rifle, ready to kill Glenn. We learn she set a trap for him using a recorded whistle sound to lure him out. Glenn steps outside, falls for the trap, and just as he does, she shoots and kills him. Susan quickly leaves the house and goes to a bridge over the river, where she throws the weapon away to avoid getting in trouble with the police. Meanwhile, Peter is performing his act at the talent show. He tells the audience he's going to do a magic trick and bring his brother Henry back to life. He opens a small box, and snow begins to fall from it, amazing the crowd. We learn that Peter chose this specific trick because Henry taught it to him. Susan arrives just in time and is proud of Peter because the audience loved his performance. A week later, Susan is granted custody of Christina, and the court officially approves the adoption. At last, Susan is able to move on from Henry's death. She honors his wish and begins writing children's stories, just like he wanted. And that's where the movie ends. If you liked it, give us a thumbs up and leave your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel.